Hello and welcome to this episode of the Reset Podcast. I'm your host, Laura Mignot. Each episode, I always bring on amazing game-changing folks in entrepreneurship, business, and this episode, no different. I am super delighted to have Matt McCain and Michael Boychuk, who are the founders of Little Hand of Stone. They have an amazing story about how they came together, built this awesome company, and so much more. It's going to be a delightful conversation. Take a listen. Hi, guys. Welcome to the show.
Hi. Thank you very much.
I'm delighted to have you guys on, and I was reading up on your story, and it's really pretty cool. So, you obviously listened to the podcast, so you know what the first question is. This should not be a surprise. Yeah. I'm very curious about what your respective answers are going to be. So let's dive in. Matt and Michael, you can all fight over who wants to go first. Yeah. But what was your first job?
Go ahead, Matt. You go ahead.
All right. Juke and I talked about this before, and it's funny because both our first jobs ended in disaster. So my first job, I was a dishwasher at Bear Creek Country Club down the street here, and at 15. And on my very first night, the senior dishwasher Chuck took me on a garbage dumping run and barreled down this really steep hill in a golf cart and flipped it. And my head went through the roof of the golf cart, almost severing my ear off. And so that's how my first job ended. Juke, how did yours end?
It's not really about how it ended, especially when it's in a near-death experience. But okay, right. Good Lord. Okay, yeah. Well, I hope he sued at least.
Yeah, I didn't sever anything, but on my first job was working in food concessions at the Fort Worth Zoo in Fort Worth, Texas. And I actually got fired on my first day because of a food fight that, for the record, I did not start, but I was an easy fire because someone had to go.
How does one start a food fight on your first day?
Someone was throwing fries, and I think I might have joined in at some point. It was.
Oh, so you left out that rather important key indicator that you participated in the actual food fight.
Yes. Well, I was young. I thought that's maybe how food service was supposed to go, but I learned my lesson.
Well, that's how it's not supposed to go. Although, I mean, if you worked at a Waffle House, your fighting skills would be looked upon as a badge of honor. So
exactly.
So it was that. Exactly. Wow. Yes. I mean, yeah. Okay, I think I'm at 350 odd episodes of this podcast, and this by far is the first time I've had two guests tell me that their first jobs was up to them being fired on the first day. One fired since they got killed. Yeah. Also, how did they fire you when you nearly got killed?
Well, so it was just I kind of got lumped in with the bad crowd. We got rehired because it's hard to find dishwashers. So Chuck ended up taking who seemed like he was 40 at the time. He was probably like 23, took the fall and took responsibility. And I got brought back on to keep my dishwashing career progressing. Thank goodness.
Wow. That's, by far, I knew you guys would be fun, but this is long. It's like, okay.
And Matt has carried his dishwashing skills to this day. He's pretty adamant about the way the dishes have to be washed in the office before we head home. No grease streaks.
Not a plate in the sink with nary a streak on it, right?
Well, I want to take us. We're going to go past we're going to go into an hours long podcast here, but I'm going to out Chuck for he doesn't like using a sponge. He uses his hands to wash dishes.
So that is so uncouth.
I'd like your listeners to weigh in on if that's right or wrong.
Yeah. They would have to see our sponge in order to really weigh in.
Buy a sponge. Like, this is a thing. This is a guy thing. I don't understand how you do this. If the sponge is trash, toss it, and buy another one. This is not hard. There, 99 cents.
It's a
I've
nasty
seen
sponge.
so many dudes do this, and I'm just like, I don't understand why. Like, just why are you using your hand? Like, just literally go buy a sponge. Like, there's
Yes.
in a world where there is Target, Walmart, and 11,000 other small convenience stores where sponges are aplenty. Well, somehow
Fair
you all
enough.
can land or in a world where Amazon exists? No, I can't defend you on that. You cannot.
Okay.
Yeah.
It sounds like I lose.
Yep.
There we go.
Wow.
Resolved.
Unbelievable.
Resolved.
Very
Done.
quickly. That's okay.
Okay.
It's okay though. We won't
Making
we won't
progress.
hold it too firmly against you, but still slightly against you.
Okay.
So basically, you started off by essentially nearly killing someone,
Yeah.
also inciting a riot,
Yes.
and then also discussing the weird cleaning habits of your offices.
Yes.
So we're off to a roaring start.
Yes.
So how are we chatting? Who are you two? How did you get to be here?
Well, we're Little Hands of Stone. We Matt and I actually have worked together in various capacities over. Actually, I was doing the math this morning. Almost 25 years now. And which is hard to believe, but we were partners in LA at an agency called Wong Duty. A lot of people, I'm sure, have heard of it. And we just had a lot of fun working together. And through the years, we've been partners. Matt was actually a freelancer for me when I was at Amazon. And now we're partners in our own, having our own agency together. So we've kind of experienced every side of a creative relationship together, which I think has been a big part of how and why we've built the agency that we have and how we think about how we should work.
Interesting. So how did you all meet? Like, I want to get the full backstory. You're skipping over the backstory here.
Yeah.
Well, we were partners. I was the writer. Chuk was the art director at Wong Duty, and we got paired together at Wong Duty LA. And so that's how we became friends. And then my wife insisted that we move back to Seattle and away from LA. So
oh dear,
because
why?
the thought of having a baby in LA was not on the cards. So we moved apart, and it's funny because we took pretty different. We kept reconnecting through the years, but we took pretty different paths. So, I stayed in Seattle and became a creative director, and Chuk went off to take these huge jobs at Leo Burnett, places like that, and then ended up high up within Amazon at their internal agency D1. And then at the time I was I was a freelancer. So we building a network of kind of fellow freelancers. So we really went away and developed vastly different experiences.
Yeah.
And then about 4 years ago, decided why don't we create the agency that we would want to work with if we were clients.
Yeah.
And that was the basic idea behind Little Hands of Stone.
Yeah, and my time on the client side working for Amazon was really formative as well, because it was just a crazy experience to go from, as Matt said, we worked at smaller boutique agencies and I worked at the biggest agency in the world, but being a client was a crazy experience to sit on the other side of the table. And I thought at that point I sort of knew everything, but then I realized, sitting on the other side of that table, what it's like to be a client and how different that is, and what was broken about the agency system and why it didn't work for me as a client. And that was really a lot of inspiration for us in talking about the kind of agency that we wanted to build and how it should operate and how it could be better than what we saw.
And so you guys start this out, and had you ever run a business before?
No.
So
Well, as a
freelancer,
it was kind of a business, but it's pretty funny. Like when we had started Little Hands of Stone and we were talking to a prospective client, and it was just Chuk and I.
Yeah.
And this client's like, okay, what's your blended rate? And Chuk and I looked at each other and like, okay, we need to call somebody that knows what a blended rate is and can tell us. So there was what we call
spoken like creatives.
Yes, two creatives.
It.
Yeah, there was a massive what we call the dark side of the moon of stuff we did not know, and realized and agreed early on that ignorance is not cute.
Yeah,
we're not coming off as cute by saying, oh, we don't know how to do that. So we know what we don't know, and we really try to figure it out and ask questions. So we're not pretending that ignorance is cute.
Yeah. We actually really both, I think, before we did this, love kind of are business minded, and we love the business side of things. But yeah, I mean, we were willfully ignorant of how money actually enters an agency and turns into a paycheck.
Creative.
That's how a bill becomes a law. There's a whole process.
Right, exactly.
I mean, it's like a point of pride for creatives to avoid money talk. Like, let me leave the room if you're going to talk budgets. I don't want to hear. I can't be bothered. You're going to sully my creative genius with all these facts and figures. So that is the wrong way to go about it. For any young creatives out there, don't be like that, because we were.
Learn it.
Yeah, no, you are speaking the language of my daily life now, because oftentimes I'm like, you all need to hear how much this stuff costs, so you will stop pitching it. It's not, we cannot do it.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, all right, so you guys start the business.
Yeah.
What's the first thing you learned after learning that you actually had to do a blended rate?
First thing we learned.
Wow, there's so many first things. It's such a great question. I mean, we initially, we have a lot of experience with creative, and I think when you start a business, you lean into what you know, and we're both very senior in that respect. So I think we could definitely hit the ground running there, but we quickly realized that we needed help, and it's a little overwhelming when you start a company to figure out what help you need. And we found a great producer that was willing to work with us and to help us start the company. And so I think kind of figuring out how to bring those capabilities on, and how to scale is really a big trick in starting a company. And we're both pretty frugal in wanting to make sure we're building the company towards how it's growing, not how it might be in a few years. So really getting that production help and someone that could help us scope and figure out how to crack the dark side of the moon and be kind of a Swiss Army knife was really key to getting somewhat functional in the early days.
I think also Chuk, you mentioned frugality.
Yeah.
And one thing, it's really tempting when you start an agency and things start picking up and business starts coming in, is to try to legitimize yourself with a fancy office and things like that. And we learned early on that we've got to, this is a really unpredictable business. Everything is project based, and you can have a great 6 months and then things totally change. So we learned there's a backstory to this, but don't buy the truck.
Yeah.
There was Chuk's dad was Chuk, why don't you tell the story about where the don't buy the truck comes from?
Yeah. When we were cracking the dark side of the moon, we reached out. We talked to everyone that we knew that did things that we didn't do, or brought skill sets that we knew we were humble enough to know that we needed to figure out. And my dad was a CEO in retail for decades, and but at the time, recently he had owned a general store in rural Vermont, and I said to him, I said, Dad, what's the most important piece of advice you have for Matt and I as we're starting the company? And he said, don't buy the truck. He said, I work with an accountant in Vermont. She's a typical kind of accountant that works with 9 different companies and, plumbers and contractors and stores and everything. And she always tells me, when someone starts a business, the first thing these guys do is they buy a truck. They buy a big Ford F-350 4x4 with graphics on the side and the Bluetooth sound system. And she said, as soon as you buy the truck, you're paying for the truck. And that's one of the things that we still say a lot to this day, just when we're tempted to spend the company's money on something like furniture or something that we don't really need. And we learned that early on to really make sure that we're investing in people and paying people, freelancers or full-timers, a fair wage and valuing them and having senior people and not wasting money or burdening the company with things that we don't really need. So I'm sitting in our plywood floored Fremont office space, which is a living example of definitely not buying any trucks.
Well, it's actually a really great metaphor for a lot of things. I think, as a former entrepreneur, I fully understand that. It's like, I remember I found every way for us not to pay for an office for as long as humanly possible.
Yeah.
With every manipulation I could find. I always tell a story that like folks were like, well, like, how did you get to know everybody? I was like, well, guess what I did? We basically moved into a hotel and sat there every single day. And it was a brand new hotel. They didn't know they needed like cool people to show up there.
Yeah.
And so we're like, oh, cool. We'll be your best brand ambassador because we'll sit right in the front in the glass that points out to the street.
Yeah.
And folks will see these like, smart women typing away on your laptops and think, oh, great. A cool meeting place for startups. Great.
Yeah.
And we did that for years. And, it's that I think sometimes you're right. Folks think that you have to get all flashy, buy the things. And I think that there's an art and a science to that. Like there are things you should invest in, like going to some of the conferences, making those trips, going out, pushing yourself to be in places that are kind of out of your comfort zone, because oftentimes that's where you're going to find your next client. But the stuff that's like the hard assets, like the office, the car, are not the things that you actually need to be successful. If you do damn good work, the money will come, and it'll put you in a position to buy not maybe the truck, but maybe a Fiat. And just be smart about it as you go.
Yes,
and I think it goes like you talked about investing in people, but I think we've also been careful to not hire too quickly, because another thing is like you get drunk on some success. You're like, we got to build our team. We have to have this. We have to build our culture, and you start just adding people in the thinking that momentum could last forever to just keep growing, and it's such an up and down business that we've all lived through a bunch of cycles of layoffs and things like that, and we all wanted to avoid that, but also we found that we could, by having a small core team and scaling and adding the right people for the right job, it's not just financial sense, but it also creates more effective teams by creating those teams per job rather than having people sitting around.
Oh yeah, I think it's a function of the business, and as people choose where they want to work now because of the way the world's changed in the last 3 years, having that flexibility, but also understanding that you're working with a tight team that like, hey, we're gonna have these fits and spurts where it's gonna be go 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 go, and this will be slow 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 slow, and if you can rock with that, perfect. If not, it won't work for you. And I think you end up with the people who are the best at that you need by being very upfront with that and letting people know like this is how it's going to ride. And it's an imperative for business right now.
It is. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, we had that philosophy and we got that excellent piece of advice, and then the pandemic hit, and as it happened, no one saw that coming when we started the company, and it seemed like a weird dystopian sci-fi fantasy, but then it happened, and that flexibility is really what allowed us to survive. So I think it's a good for anyone that's starting out, any kind of company really, that being very careful and remaining nimble and flexible. I think as the world just kind of continues to change and it doesn't really show any signs of letting up, that flexibility that you give yourself by not burdening the company with things that you don't need is just critical. So it was an important lesson and one that was that helped us get through some tough years.
So I have to ask, where does the name come from?
Well,
go ahead, Matt. You tell it.
Yeah, there was a boxer in the 80s and 90s. His name was Michael Carbajal. His name is Michael Carbajal. Michael Little Hands of Stone Carbajal, and he was he boxed at 108 pounds, so he was a tiny, wiry guy, but he hit really hard and he was really accurate, and he really dazzled crowds in the era of the heavyweight. So we just love the idea of kind of efficiency and effectiveness being more important than how big you are. So we took the name Little Hands of Stone. We think of ourselves as effectiveness concentrate.
I like it. No, and it's cool because it's interesting because name origin stories are always fun for me. Like I used to use it as a way to get people to have coffee with me by saying, if you want to know how you can't my company's name, you have to find me a drink or have a coffee with me. And it worked because it's an amazing story. So each of those little pieces about, because again, it's all about how you sell your brand, how you get people intrigued and engaged. And then once you've gotten intrigued and engaged, you're like, oh, I want to learn more. And then you reel them in and then you sell them. So that's literally, that's literally how it gets done. So having it be named for a boxer, pretty cool indeed.
Yeah. And we've avoided the leaning too hard into the boxing metaphor, but it is really about kind of the tension in Little being nimble and being able to move fast and adjust and build towards the project, and the Stone part being the ability of an idea to hit hard and to really solve big problems for companies. So there's an inherent tension in that, but again, that kind of comes from experience working client side and seeing that companies are moving quickly. They have internal teams now. They have resources, but they need external push. This is sort of reverse engineered out of that realization of what a lot of big agencies, in my experience, were getting wrong, and the way that we love to work too, and the kind of work that we love doing.
That's really, really cool. So obviously, you guys have done a lot of fun things, and you've begun to build a really awesome, really cool agency. What's one thing you know now that you wish you knew right as you were starting out?
Great question. Great question. God, there's so many things, aren't there? So many.
Here's one. So we hit the ground running in 2019. We got a big assignment with Amazon Web Services. National campaign. There's a partnership between AWS and the NFL. So we're shooting commercials with Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes and all this stuff. So hit the ground running really fast, and just business was coming to us, and we didn't have to really figure out how to like business outreach, PR, and we didn't build those muscles. So when it came time, like COVID came around, and it was time to actually go out and hunt down new business, we gave ourselves a C-, maybe a D+ in those aspects. So we were like, if you do great work, that's all you need to do. The business is going to come. So I think we needed to know right out of the gate that you have to build those outreach muscles, and you have to, like you talked about, like you have to go to those conferences. That was the last thing we wanted to do, because like we're just doing great work, everything's going to fix itself. Everything's going to happen on its own. So that was really dumb to think that way. And we know that now.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting because we continue to talk to as many people as we can that are further down the path than we are. And they all have a similar story about being very dependent initially on relationships that they carried over from previous jobs. And so, it's hard to say if we could have forced ourselves to do that earlier, or if you kind of have to go through it in order to get to a place where you can really speak about what about your process and what your unique point of view is as an agency. It's hard to say if you have to evolve into it or if we could have done it earlier, but it has certainly been the learning curve of the last year or so, which is just really sharpening up the story that we need to tell. And it's interesting because, as I said, we've worked together for almost 25 years, and there is, when we look back, there's a current in the work that we do, in the way that we think, and the way that the work that we both love, that we had to surface and articulate, which is no easy feat. But it is interesting that it was always there.
Well, it's interesting, and thank you for that candor, because I think sometimes folks and I've seen this a lot with my friends who, when I had my agency and they were at big agencies and then said, "Oh, I'm going to start my own agency."
Yeah.
I'm like, "Cool. Who do you know?" Well, I have my clients. I'm like, "Who else do you know?"
Right.
Like, what do you mean? And it's like, you do realize that at some point, like, that is not going to be your only client, right?
Yeah.
And that you're going to have to, like, go force yourself out and meet new people and tell them why they should care about you.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's not going to just happen naturally. You're not going to wake up one day and say, I think it's time for me to start thinking about growth that's not organic. What happens is it's forced on you, and that's a scary feeling when suddenly you realize, oh shit, I need to start thinking about the business differently, and we need to start growing differently, and we need to pivot. As I said, my dad was an entrepreneur in his career, and I saw him do it, and I saw him get caught up in cycles that are frankly, bigger than you are, but you have to be ready to adjust, because it's not going to be up to you when you have to do that. It's you're going to be forced into it, and you'd better figure it out pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, I never actually call it this, but it's your ABCs. It's always be connecting. Because you never know who's going to be the person who ends up dropping that huge project in your lap.
Yeah.
And the big part of that connection piece is the visibility, which is what you guys are doing right now. Where it's like, you have to shoot your shot wherever you might be and let folks see you in different places, and yet you're willing to have the conversations, and you're also like just ready to have the coffee with somebody, because I can tell you, well, I don't exist in my current form had that not been me, and it wasn't something I was at all comfortable with. I love how everyone always assumes I love people. I love talking to people. Like, actually, I don't.
Yeah.
I would much rather be home watching Scandal reruns. But I also am a business person, and I understand the importance of that. And I learned it from one of my clients early on. One of my dearest clients was our first client at my agency, and it was a client all the way through the 11 years of me having my agency before we sold. And even now we're dear friends, and he's about to be my client again for my big agency. And I remember saying to him, like, how do you know all these people? And he's like, I take a meeting. I don't care who it is. And I said, I always have 20 minutes. I can always spend 20 minutes. And, we really did follow that thinking about, like, you know what? I have 20 minutes. What's up?
Yeah.
Because you just literally never know, because like someone randomly's dad is the person who works at this company, or someone's aunt happens to be the CMO of this company, and because you were nice to that person, doesn't mean you have to give them all of your time. That person is like, oh hey, like, this is the thing. Like I will always use my recent trip to the White House. Because folks were like, how did you get to the White House? I was like, I was nice to somebody. They were on the podcast, and kept in touch and just like stayed top of mind.
Yeah.
And that's the key for a lot of this stuff. And I think, oftentimes we get so caught up in like we have to do the things the perfect way that big agencies do them. Yada yada yada. Like there is
Right.
there is a rhyme and a rhythm to that, but there really also is the side that requires the relationship building that takes these concentric circles in your universe and continues to grow them throughout your career, because you literally never know where your next client's coming from.
Yeah. So true.
I think that's important what you said. It's like you have to force yourself out of your comfort zone, because you would rather be home watching Scandal reruns, but you do this. And I think for a long time I was just more comfortable kind of living in the creative and not forcing myself outside of that. But yeah, you got to learn that lesson eventually.
And that's what I love about the job that we're all doing, is that it's so fun to learn. And I as I cross over into my 50s solidly, I just love that every day we're coming in and there are things to learn, and sometimes those things are really, really frightening. I mean, it's easy to say get outside your comfort zone, but when you're in that position and you're really doing something that you don't feel comfortable about, it's visceral. I mean, you break into a cold sweat about it. And but I think that's what makes life great. And I totally agree. I mean, my old boss Susan Cradle used to talks a lot about being generous. And I love what you said about that, because I do think that as we both get older, I mean, I definitely find that helping people and being generous with what we've learned and the scars that we picked up along the way, if that helps other people, that's so great, because it's just such a small industry, and everyone needs help. So anyway, I love the spirit in that.
Yeah.
It is the way.
It is the way.
For you guys, obviously it's busy, it's tiring, it's exhausting doing what you do. What do you do for your self-care?
Well, we both love outdoors, and we both, it's interesting. One of the first things that Matt and I agreed on when we started this was that we were not going to do it if it required 80 hours a week of our time. We both love our families and we love our lives, and we just there's just something sometimes in advertising that seems to require people to have their lives consumed by it, and we don't want that. We feel like we've got the experience now to kind of have a blue collar ethic with the way that we work. When we're in the office, we work really hard from the moment we get in until we have a beer before we go home. But it is really about getting your work done and then going home and taking a break. And we've been even experimenting with a 4-day work week, which has been really fun, and love giving employees that time. But it's just really that balance that kind of keeps us in the game and keeps us recharging, and because you just can't burn out. It's just a horrible way to work.
Yeah, I think so. Taking time away from work is really important, but also, Juke and I have been really conscious of our relationship as partners.
Yeah.
And we treat it as a marriage, because the partnerships can get toxic pretty easily if you don't take care of them. So we have learned to, when we see things getting a little funky, we're really good at kind of pulling aside and just like, let's work through this. And that has helped us get through some really tough times, creatively, strategically, is just taking care of the relationship, because if our relationship goes bad, the business goes with it. So I think that's self-care too, is just having a healthy partnership that's really honest.
I love that. And it's always interesting, like, whenever I ask men who are on the show about this, it's very interesting how they approach it. And I really like the way that you guys talked about it. Like, yes, we go outdoors, but also we prioritize our health within the work that we do. And I think that is new and refreshing for a lot of men in our industry. Because I think it has before been like, well, of course you're going 80 hours a week. Like, I've got to go.
Yeah.
And like, I will drive my team into the ground because that's the way it's always been.
Yeah.
And so it's delightfully refreshing to hear that you guys who've lived life are saying, like, we know that if when I'm on, I'm on, and when I'm off, I'm off.
Yeah.
And understanding the value of that to your employees, because again, the world is like it's funny how we all changed in 3 years. We all went from, yes, I'll go to the 8 a.m. breakfast. Yes, I'll go to that lunch. Yes, I'll go to that happy hour. Yes, I'll go to that dinner. And it's all the same day. And now it's like, if I go to the breakfast, I'm not going to dinner. If I go to the dinner, I'm going to nothing else.
Yeah.
And so I don't think it's that we've all kind of taken a step back per se, but we've prioritized what actually matters. And it's like, do I need to be there till 7? No.
Yeah.
Like, I have 2 phones, and my work phone doesn't leave the holder on the weekend.
Yeah.
Because doesn't need to. Like, it's shattering. Someone on my team has my real number, and they will call.
Yeah.
Everything else can be left till Monday. And so it's so important, I think, as leaders at this moment, to be like, this is the kind of environment that we're fostering, but also the honesty about the partnership. Because I think, again, folks think it's just easy breezy and like you never have a moment of strife and it's just going to be, smooth sailing. But I think the awareness that you guys clearly have that like nothing is, ever perfect, and that how do we work through that? How do we find the common ground when we need to before it becomes World War VII is a business imperative.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so true. And I mean, it's really, a lot of it is as Matt said, like a marriage, and just having respect and understanding that I know that there are people that have started agencies on their own. I cannot figure out how that is even possible. It's, for me, I couldn't do it without a partner. It's so great to have a partner. Our rule is you never take more than half the credit or half the blame. We share everything. We share the stress and we share the glory. And it's very helpful to have someone sitting across from you that you respect, because there are a lot of times where we disagree, and I know I can look at Matt, and if I disagree with him, I can say, you know what? My underlying respect tells me I might be wrong. Let's go with what you think, because there's something in that. And I think that makes the decision making, the real hard decisions, a lot easier in kind of being willing to give up and let the other person lead and kind of have that decision because you trust them and you respect them.
I also think like the partnership's been really helpful to me, because sometimes one partner's down, like when one partner's down, it's the other partner just kind of steps in to pick them up. We all can't be in the same kind of momentum space at the same time a lot of times. So it's like if one person starts getting a little bit pessimistic, the other person's in charge of being the optimist, and then it'll switch 2 weeks later. So that's really important to have that other half to balance you out, and fill in where you need it.
That's really good stuff, guys. And like I said, it's a really awesome testament to your leadership and like the kind of culture that you're building. So I tip my hat to you. So last question for you guys. Do you have a give and or an ask of the audience?
Love it.
Give, ask. Well, please do weigh in on Chuk's non-use of sponges while washing pint glasses.
You mean Chuk's literal hand washing?
Yes.
Clean hands.
So yeah, I'm serious about that. Chuk?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I think, we'd love to hear from people if you have any thoughts about what we've talked about, and we love the conversation and talking to people and hearing what they have going on. I was down at the small agency conference down in Atlanta a few months ago and was just so blown away by the spirit of small agencies and how small agencies are out there to help each other. And it just, I love that. It didn't feel cutthroat at all. It felt like everyone wanted everyone else to succeed. So if anyone out there has thoughts about what they're hearing, don't hesitate to reach out, or if you'd like to talk about something more that you're going through that you're interested in our 2 cents, we're happy to chat. So we love making connections and would love to help anyone out that thinks we can help them with their dark side of the moon.
I like his answer better. That was a better answer.
Both are important, though.
Look, both are extremely viable and important. I know my answer to the first part of the question. But guys, really super cool talking with you. We'll put all the details in your show notes, so folks can reach out and connect with you all. It's really awesome to see what you've built and the way that you have built it with empathy and care. And that's it's really really lovely to see. I really enjoyed chatting with you guys, and thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's an honor. We appreciate the interest, and it's been a really fun chat.
Cool. And that is our show.